I'm with you on we're closer to therapists. I say we're coaches more than therapists, but we're not diagnosing or treating any mental illness, but we're working with how do we change our money mindset and how do we get you to enjoy your money? And that's part of that holistic approach that you're on the right page with.
Yeah, it's trying to get everybody on the right page. Married couples that are coming from different directions and kids that have expectations that you can't meet. Everything's going to be fine because my parents will take care of me. No, that's not the case. You need to take care of yourself.
The assumptions out there just kill me.
Welcome to the Childfree Wealth Podcast, hosted by Bree and Dr. J, Certified Financial Planner. Here we discuss life and finances as it relates to being child-free. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult your advisor before implementing any ideas heard on this podcast.
Hey, Childfree Wealth listeners. Today I got somebody different. And Bill and I had lunch at FinCon, but I had been following his stuff for quite a while. Bill Yount, he's like the guru, the creator of Catching Up to Fi. And he'll tell his whole story, but he's really talking about what happens when you've been going through your life, you get kind of that 40s, 50s, and you're like, oh, I might need to figure out some of this finance stuff. We have an episode called Forced Adulting. It's, oh, I hit 40 and I need to be an adult. We've all had it. But he's also an emergency doc. Now, I want to call him Doc Bill, but that's too much like Doc Phil. So, he's an emergency doc. And I'm going to actually ask him some questions about that from a child-free standpoint on top of the finance stuff. So we're going to pick both his brain on finance and medical. But Bill, great to have you.
Oh, it's nice to be here, Jay. I really appreciate it. It was nice meeting you in person at FinCon. And it's nice that we have an opportunity to talk about some important stuff today.
Tell me kind of the backstory. You were a doc, so you had to have been rich already. But
right, exactly.
No, I mean, that's the assumption. It's the same assumption we get. You're child-free, you're rich. But it's not true. But tell us a story.
Well, I mean, my money story is not complicated. I didn't know anything about it. At age 50, when I woke up, I didn't know what a net worth statement was. I didn't know what a balance sheet was. I didn't budget. We were paycheck to paycheck. We'd bought the big houses, bought and leased the big cars. We got caught, as I say it, in the funnel of life. We had twin boys back right out of residency, my wife and I, and one of them had significant developmental disabilities that we had to address. And we focused on that. And money flew out the window every which direction. And we were focused on recovering him. And we did. He was at that time on the spectrum. And, it is possible. There is neuroplasticity. You can recover people from significant challenges like that. And we did.
That's amazing. And then you're just hanging out being a ER doc and you're like, I should start doing some finance stuff?
Yeah, about 50, I woke up as the kids were getting ready to exit the nest, and I had not adulted, as you say, in finance at all. We had made every mistake in the book. We'd bought whole life insurance. We invested with a private bank who were salesmen, and we paid a lot for getting nothing. We made, as I call it, the trifecta of mistakes back around the Great Recession, where we had rebuilt a house and we were house poor. We're not saving first, but we're spending first and saving last. And the Great Recession hit and we were upside down in our house, and we missed out on a significant portion of the bull market that came thereafter because we weren't focused on saving and we had too high of a mortgage to save much. It was tough to overcome all the multitude of mistakes we made. But, and there was this shock wake up moment at 50 where I said, and I'm 59 now, 9 years into this journey, and to take control of our finances, take our money back from the big bank, put it in Vanguard, take control of our own finances, learn how to make trades, learn how to track expenditures. There was a whole lot to learn. Everybody talks about going down the rabbit hole, and I went down deep, but as a doctor, highly trained in saving people's lives in the emergency room, I was woefully unintelligent when it came to managing the most important language that we all speak, which is money.
Yeah. And by the way, that's very common. You're a little older than me, but when I was in high school, the only thing that taught me was how to balance a checkbook, which is a giant freaking waste of time. That's it. That's the entire financial education, and it sounds like yours was just about the same.
Yeah. I mean, my dad was a doctor, And they didn't talk about money at all. I didn't know that they bought their cars with cash. I knew that they were frugal, and I came from a scarcity mindset. We were led to feel that we were poor in spite of the fact that my dad was a state employed doctor, the rich private practice doctor at the time. He enjoyed being an academic, so you have to think a little bit differently about what doctor means there. But growing up, we were very middle class. There was nothing fancy at all about it, but there was no education at all in it. And they had a terrible marriage, got divorced. And I think divorce is tantamount to being financially literate in some ways, because there's just big money trauma that goes on there. And I learned all my first lessons about money were fear-based and scarcity-based. It was not an abundance mindset at all.
What about this argument people make, like, well, it's too late for me. I'm 50. I mean, I should have done this when I was 30. Like, everything says by 50, I need to have X amount of money in the bank. I take you don't buy into that.
You have to have 10x your income, right? All those things, those rules of thumb that work real well. No, it's never too late to start. The adage of the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago or today is true. My co-host on the show, Catching Up to Five, that we started was Becky Heptig, and she has a great story. She started at 50 with zero net worth. She and her husband did. At age 63, they retired with $1.4 million, and they're living their best lives. She graciously co-hosted the podcast with me for the first year, and her story inspired so many. I mean, I have more of a boring story, the stupid rich doctor, right? I mean, that's not a story that necessarily resonates with people, unless all the doctors out there who maybe listen to this, come on over, because I know you're out there. You made the same mistakes I did, and you have the target on your back. Let's recover together. And recover she did, and recover we have. Current co-host Jackie Kamenskowski has a similar story. She grew up in poverty, woke up at divorce at age 38, 39, and realized that her husband had 5x saved in his 401k over what she did and wanted to know why. And at age 49, she retired again with a net worth of 1.3, 1.4 million. And now it's much more north of that. And she's living her best life as a financial educator. Absolutely possible. We see the light at the end of the tunnel. We're 3 to 4 years away from me exiting at least my career. My wife loves her career, and part of my exit plan is that she wants to work longer. There's lots of ways to get there. Many roads do lead to Rome, but they all lead there.
I'm one of those that don't believe you're actually going to retire. You might retire as a doc, like you're on this podcasting stuff and on the finance stuff. I mean, I swear you're going to be busier than you ever thought, ever were as a doc.
Well, I'll probably actually educate myself in finance formally afterwards. I mean, I see a renaissance in doing some formal CFP education or some. I may be 64, but I'm not done yet, right? And I may do it for my own edification, or I may, have a renaissance career and help others, physicians, for example, that had the same travails that I did.
Yeah, and we see a lot of that. We call them encore careers, whatever you want to call it. Hey, I was trained for this. I'm going to go back and do something I enjoy. People going back to be librarians. I don't know why librarians, but they're very popular. But whatever it is. I want to talk about assumptions for a second. I had a conversation just this past week working with some Childfree folks, and they're like, hey, I've got a bunch of Childfree friends, and we hang out. But I don't think they really need financial advice because they're all doctors and executives and all that. And I was like, okay, just because they have a high-paying job does not mean they know how to manage their money. I mean, does that make sense? I mean, I see this assumption out there.
Well, it's scary because you see people in finance that are managing billions of dollars that are, up to their eyeballs in debt. I mean, a brief story. I had a physician and his wife, who's a lawyer, reach out to us because we put ourselves out there in the Catching Up to Five domain. And we are, as far as I know, the only ones in this space, because we see ourselves as the average American, the hyperconsumption society, the paycheck to paycheck society. Most people might start in their 30s and wake up and feel late then. And no matter when you wake up and you feel late, you feel like you're a late starter, although you may be well in time to finish what is normally a 10 to 15 year journey if you manage it appropriately. But we had this physician and this lawyer reach out to us because they didn't know what to do anymore. They needed some coaching. They had a high six-figure income, maybe $900,000 a year. But they had a multi-million-dollar mortgage. They had a margin loan. They had a HELOC. They had 4 kids. They had like 5 cars, all on payments. It was unbelievable. And it doesn't matter how much money you make. It just adds zeros to the problem.
You're right on. I think some of the messiest finances I've seen are from CPAs. Like they manage giant companies, huge millions, and then they look at their personal finance like, yeah, what do I do with this?
We always feel that we can start later. I mean, we make so much money that, oh yeah, I can start that 5 years down the road. I can enjoy life now and I'll get started saving. And then the can gets kicked down the road until there's this wake up moment, which is, I think, very similar for everybody that wakes up.
So, okay, you have the wake up moment. You're like, I want to, we call it adulting, kind of like do the things I'm supposed to do, the good boy, good girl things. What's the first step, you kind of think? Like, where do you start when you've been like, a lot of people head in the sand, kind of just, I'm going to ignore this. How do you start on the catch up?
Well, Jackie and I always say you have to give yourself grace first. I got stuck in shame is where I got stuck for a while. And I got stuck in analysis paralysis because being the type A physician, I had to know everything about finances before I started. So I spent probably a year, you may not see all these books back here, but I spent probably a year reading a ton of books instead of just getting started too. There are some simple steps you can take where, just invest in index funds, start investing, go to your favorite custodian. Mine is Fidelity, but don't partner with them in the advisor standpoint. If you need some coaching, there are now a bevy of advice-only advisors out there to help coach you up to the point where you can do it yourself and DIY it. It's not that hard, but and the world of finance, as you know, is made to seem so overly complex and overwhelming that you can't do it without having your hand held. That's not true. But for me, it was just the first step was taking the money out of the private bank we were in and getting it somewhere else where I could manage it. And then I got caught up in complexity a little bit. I'm like, okay, if I have to catch up, I've got to push all these buttons and make sure that I have all these these asset classes involved and forward rebalance into 10 asset classes. And I had to gradually step back from that because where I landed was a pretty complex book, The Intelligent Asset Allocator by Bill Bernstein, because I'm a book reader. And that is one of the more complex books in investing I think I've read. I had to get out a financial calculator and learn how to use it in order to read the book. Start with the simple books. Yeah, people say the simple path to wealth, and they're not wrong. I believe in the keep it simple, stupid principle, and I've worked my way back from more complex to a very simple approach that, for example, my wife could manage if I was no longer here. You have to think not only about yourself, but who's going to pick up the pieces and who may not be as interested after you're gone, should that, tragically happen. It is just pause, give yourself grace, don't right away, and then you plan. Maybe you should Google, how do I make my own investor policy statement? Because financial planning isn't just what investments I pick. There's so much more to it. And you've got to get your insurances in place. You've got to get your will and trust and legal documents in place, powers of attorney. There's so much that you've got to get done, and it can seem overwhelming. So that's why you need to write out a plan. You need to write it down. You need to sign it with your spouse. And then you need to gradually knock things off the list.
I'm with you. I spent this morning looking at a client's prospects stuff, and the amount of fees they were paying to their investment advisor is crazy. Investment can be very simple, okay? And it works. We offer both advice only, or we'll do investment management at the same price. But like the investment's the easy part. It's the other stuff that is hard. Like my life planning, my estate planning, my long-term care planning, all the other pieces that people don't think about. You're investing, you could set the 3 fund like in the simple path to wealth, set it, forget it, and call it a day. They got VTSAX and chill. I don't care. Like you can do all from those structures. It does not have to be complex. And I'm going to argue if you're ever taking out a financial calculator, you went too far.
I definitely did. But that was accidentally where I landed because Bill Bernstein was a neurologist, and he's a highly intelligent man in many ways, and he's a historian. But that's how he started, because he was sort of a complex thinker. And I landed a little bit wrongly, and it took me a while to unwind that, actually. So it is important where you start, and to start simple really is the answer. But we think that we can't do that because we've got to do more to catch up. There's some easy button. There's not an easy button. You've just got to invest in the market. That does 80, 90% of the work. You got to figure out your risk, portfolio a little bit. You got to figure out, okay, what's my tolerance? And maybe get some advice from somebody on how to figure that out. It's not from a questionnaire. It's like, how can you sleep at night when your investments are working for you? There are some basic principles that you've got to get right before you start down the road of, picking an asset allocation that you can stick with for 20, 30, 40, 50-year journey.
Yeah, I mean, the tagline for my new book is, hey, we want to make your finances simple so your life can be amazing. Let's make it as simple as possible. And it's interesting because we were working with some marketing groups and, working on the website and all that. And they're like, I don't think people are going to buy financial planning that's simple. And I'm like, then we have a problem. I'm not trying to say, here's a complex plan. Here's just somebody to help you through it. And it's interesting. We have this picture that like fancier is going to get you better. And the old school question is, hey, do you want your investments to be sexy or you want them to work? And it's just the simple good behaviors that matter, not did I invest in this new cool thing?
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading Carl Richards a lot lately, and you have the one-page financial plan. The important things should be able to be written down on one page. And you don't need, like our private bank gave us, an inch-thick book with all the Monte Carlo simulations and bells and whistles where they make it look so complex, you're like scared. Yeah, you take care of it. I don't want to take care of this. That looks too complicated.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, especially for our child-free clients, there's a lot of advice out there that doesn't necessarily fit them, so we have to figure out other ways around it. And I want to ask you a specific question about that. And I'm going to put your doc hat on for a minute. One of the discussions we've been having, a large percentage of our folks are soloists, single, no kids. What happens when you go into the ER and you don't have a power of attorney and you don't have kids to be your next of kin?
Oh, that's a challenge. It happens almost every day. If you're single and you come into the ER and it's not tattooed on your head, DNR, we have no idea what to do. And you're not going to necessarily have your paperwork there. If you're coming from a nursing home, not always, but a lot of the time you will have paperwork with you with your wishes outlined. But the default, if you have no idea what to do, is to do everything. And so you're put on life support and we're shocking you, or we're doing CPR, and we may get you back, but maybe it's only your heart and not your head. And then who makes those decisions? Well, it's going to be the courts at the end of the day. My job is that you don't die in the ER so the decisions can be made more slowly. Got to make it out of the ER. Or it can be different with other constellations. It's not as common for me to see the single person with no pre-existing wishes known. You want to try and reach family. We're desperate to talk to somebody that may give us some input, but they may not have legal input to give. But we want to know, are we doing the right thing? Because that's what we're trying to do. What would this person want? And we have no idea. You've got to have your ducks in a row before tragedy strikes, and it strikes like lightning. You just don't expect it.
And you're right. I worked as a medic, so I've seen it in the field, but I think the hard part is people make these assumptions that like, oh, well, they'll try to find my parents or like a family member. I'm like, when you're like at the bedside and you're like, what do we have to do in the next 2 minutes? It's pretty hard to find somebody if there's no paperwork, no direction. So it's up to the doc. Is that fair?
Yeah, well, on the front end of these things, there's the opportunity to die nobly. You're in a window where, you could let them go and they'll go peacefully, or you can do trauma. And you've got to make this decision. Am I doing trauma to this person, their body, and potentially leaving them a vegetable? Or am I going to let them take this opportunity to die peacefully without all this intervention? And one of my biggest regrets is when I see somebody, quote unquote, survive, they're never going to enjoy the quality of life they had before at a minimum. You get, there's other constellations of this too. You can have a parent come in, and then there's a whole family of loved ones there. And then you get one person that's not on the same page, and nobody has the paperwork, and you don't know what their ulterior motive is. Maybe they've had a bad relationship with their parent, and they want to have an opportunity to fix it before they die. And they're not going to sort of sign off on the group decision-making process of, are we, going to withdraw support in the ER? I call it emergency hospice. We are hospice doctors in many ways because we make life and death decisions when death is probably the right decision, but everybody assumes ER docs are saving lives. We're trying to figure out how to navigate death a lot too.
So hold on, you got to pull that apart because I'm with you, but talk about this when death is the right decision. Like that the way you said it, I think you're on the right page, but you got to explain that.
Well, I see all the bad things that happen and all the complications. I don't see when it goes right. I see when it goes horribly wrong. And I know that I wouldn't want done to me what I do to people if I was in that situation. And in my case, I have a spouse and I'm reliant on her, and I do have all my powers of attorney in place. But that paperwork is good for times when you make it to the ICU, but it's really not good for the ER. Because in the ER, you're operating in a black hole. The paperwork's not there. You're not lined up. That's why the default is to save a life, meaning a body, and get them to a place where the decisions can be made, where people can get their ducks in a row. It's chaos in these situations, and it's a very active management thing. The best thing that can happen to me is I have a loved one or a spouse there that can give me guidance, and they know that the quality of life leading up to this event wasn't great, and it was declining. They know that the person wouldn't want to live like this, and then they watch the resuscitation. I have people in the room. I want them to see what's happening. If they can tolerate it, and sit down, and then we can actively discuss, yes, this is what we're doing. We're breathing for them, we're shocking them, and we're giving them drugs to try and restart their heart. Do you want us to do that? And when they see the trauma of what happens, it sometimes makes it much easier to make the decision.
Yeah, and I'm asking these questions because like finance we don't want to talk about and death we don't want to talk about, but like we have to. And I think people just watch too much TV. You know, you go to the ER, they rub the paddles together in the old school and shock you once and you walk out. Like that just doesn't happen. Like, and people miss that. And I guess they think you're a miracle worker and like have this perception that that's just all going to work out.
Yeah, as a single person, I haven't seen that commonly where somebody, I mean, yes, we see somebody that has nobody, and that they're often older, but say it was you or I that came in without kids, without a spouse. I'm going to err on the side of we're supposed to do no harm, but yet in reality, we're making the decision to do harm often in these cases. But I'm going to make the decision to resuscitate the heart. We don't know if the brain's going to follow, but we'll resuscitate the heart and get somebody to a position in the ICU where people can figure out who do I talk to and what do we do. And hopefully at that point, the person, if they choose to withdraw support, hopefully they'll still die. That's the problem. You get to a point where you may have got the heart back and that's going to sustain this person, but you will not have gotten other organs back, and you'll have, very quickly brain damage that people wouldn't want to live with.
I might be a little jaded, but I think we're in the same boat. Like if a client asks me, I'm like, yeah, do not resuscitate. I'd like to have that tattooed on my chest. Like if that was legally binding, like I think we just have this assumption, hey, it'll all work out, but we have to be real about it.
Well, if you think about it, I just had an idea. Maybe you see what you think. You know how we chip our pets, where we put a chip to find them if they get lost and they make it somewhere, they'll scan. Well, if we had the same thing, if we were forward thinking that we put a chip in people that says, these are my wishes right here, let's scan you and find out. Wouldn't that be nice and convenient? Maybe it's an invasion of privacy. There are probably a whole host of reasons not to do this, but it would simplify a lot of these decisions. Rather than have a tattoo, let's just have an identification chip with all of our documents in there, so you can scan it and have them, pull them up right away. Let's think out of the box.
I like a lot of the phones now have in case of emergency, a medical file you can pull up, like something. It might not be a legal document, but at least you as the doc can look at it and go, oh, this is their phone. This is who I should contact or somebody or a little information. Does that help at all or?
Well, we're human and we want to talk to other humans when a human is suffering. We want to talk, we are driven to talk to their loved ones and find out, is this what they would want? That's the question you've got to answer. And if somebody can help us with that, even if it's not, a lot of this that we do in the ER is not legally binding. We're going on faith. We're going on trust of, the next of kin, closest loved one who hopefully has a concept of their wishes. And this brings up the book by Cameron Huddleston, Mom and Dad, We Got to Talk, where you've got to have these conversations with the people that are around you, family especially, because you can't really take it from a friend, even if the friend knows your wishes. But if it's proven family and they've had the conversation, they can tell you, no, I've had this conversation with them, and you don't have the paperwork, then you're going to have to trust them.
Yeah, and I bring this up because this has been a problem I've been working on for 3 years for child-free people, of like, who makes decisions for you when you don't have a next of kin? It turns out 25% of the US is disenfranchised from their family. If you look at the LGBTQ plus community, it's even higher. 20% live nowhere near their family. When you don't have next of kin as kids, it starts opening up this Pandora's box of like nightmare scenario. And I'm going to shift a little here and ask you the one that comes finance and medical together. What do you tell people to do about long-term care?
Well, in the ER, we're not necessarily.
No, I know, but now I'm going to the other hat you have in catching up to FI. I mean, let's be real on that.
Well, I mean, what's our plan? We don't have long-term care insurance. It's super expensive, and the premiums are only going up. There are these hybrid policies of life and long-term care that I think are more approachable, and I've still got to look into that. But right now, our long-term care plan is our home equity, and we do have a significant dollar amount in our HSAs. I don't have a great plan. Day and age, I'd be interested in your answer to this conundrum, because I don't know. I mean, Medicaid pays for it, and you got to be Medicaid poor in a way to get it. Medicare, people don't realize this. It does not pay for long-term care. What is I'll turn the tables, and what do you say to your clients?
Before I go there, I just want to check with you. My experience, this is purely as a medic working in these facilities, Medicaid care is never the top of the line care. I mean, it's the bottom of the barrel. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yeah. You probably wouldn't want to be involved in this. I mean, there's so much we do, as you know, in medicine to sustain such a horrible quality of life. People are suffering in these nursing homes, and they have no quality of life, and people aren't willing to let them go. We don't do a lot of education around death anymore. We're dislocated from death. A lot of these traumatic things happen in the ER, and we turn our heads away from it. And it's behind the closed doors of the ER or in the hospital, where death is often happening. And it's not happening at home as much as it probably should.
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm a big death with dignity person. I think what we end up suggesting for our clients, because we get this all the time, child-free people, it's like, who's going to take care of you when you're older? And it's really two parts. It's that question I was just asking about the power of attorney, the executor, all that. And we're actually building a product to help child-free people with that, be out next year. But the long-term care, our goal with our clients, and this is why I bring it up to you, is to have a plan in place for long-term care by mid-40s. And that's either your money set aside or standalone long-term care policies. Now, remember, for my child-free clients, life insurance has no value. Some of the hybrids just don't work the same way. And the reason we say 45 is that's when they're most affordable. I didn't say they're affordable. I said most, and there's two companies we use. We don't sell insurance, but we work with Mutual of Omaha and NGL, and NGL offers a single pay option. You pay it all up front, and it's got an inflation rider on there. You don't have to worry about your premiums going up. What we tend to find is if you have people with between about $500,000 and $3 million of net worth, that long-term care insurance on a single pay might be a good option for them. Now, every once in a while, somebody asks you, well, what happens if I buy it and I don't use it? And my answer is, you won the game. Like, if you never have to go to long-term care, you won. I don't care what the answer is. But the home equity issue, first of all, a lot of child-free people rent, and we're okay with that because it's a different way of life. But the problem is, as a couple, the first person to go in long-term care can mess up the financials of the second person. And that's where it starts getting sticky, because what we tend to see is that the first person going to long-term care, they'll take out the reverse mortgage or things like that, because I don't want to see my family in a Medicaid facility. Let's be real. Like, no, medics joke that, if you ever see me in one of those facilities, you just like come over with a pillow and end it. And what happens is people then put all of their money into taking care of their loved one, quote unquote. And the result is, when their loved one passes, because it will happen, they're broke. And now they have the rest of their life to go.
Yeah. And then you hear about Medicaid divorces for that reason, where a couple will get divorced so that the finances of the one that needs long-term care are such that they can get Medicaid for their. It's a real problem. I'd be curious to know, what do these single premium policies at 45 cost, say, the average American to buy?
So I just did this for a couple earlier 40s, but close enough in age. And the reason we do mid 40s, by the way, is your health impacts it, but also the health of your parents. So the earlier you do it, the more likely you're better off. If you have, if one of your parents has dementia or Alzheimer's, your cost goes up by 50%-ish. If both of them have it, you can't even get a policy. So I just did one for a couple. Right now, it's based on a $250 daily limit, which is, covers the average in nursing home care. This actually covers in-home assisted living or nursing to up to that level. 3% inflation rider, 90-day elimination period. And it was about just shy of $200,000 for the single pay. And that might sound like a lot of money, but if you're going to pay out of pocket for that same couple, I say you got to put $500,000 aside purely for long-term care and let that grow. So it actually works out cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like an annuity of sorts, really, with inflation adjustment. Not that expensive, but you have to have been prudent with your wealth to get to the point where you have that excess cash to throw at policies. And we don't get educated on finances, let alone, the strategy around long-term care. I have not seen that out there. You're very much a proactive leader in the space by who you are. So I'm learning something right now.
Well, and I think the issue is people don't want to talk about their finances. They sure as hell don't want to talk about, dying and the end of life and all that other stuff. And I have a lot of clients that are like, hey, if I had my way, I would do the opt-out. I'd go to the suicide pods in Switzerland. I'm like, our laws are so screwed up. My dog gets sick, we can put him down and he's out of, he can rest in peace. But for humans, we got to pay millions of dollars for long-term care.
Well, you bring up a topic near and dear to my heart, actually, because we do take better care of our pets than we do of our own humans. We absolutely do. And I'm a big proponent of death with dignity and euthanasia when appropriate. I would want it for myself.
Exactly. The joking, so my family's got a large Alzheimer's history. I've always told my wife, I said, when I can't tie my own shoes, take me out back and, old Yeller. And I don't want to put that on her, but the joke of it is, of course, I wear shoes that slip on. That way I don't have to tie them because otherwise she might get. But why can't I? I actually had somebody I was helping a colleague with. Her whole family has a huge early onset Alzheimer's history, kind of mid 40s-ish when it hits. And she was like, I want death with dignity. Her sister was like, I'm happy to take you to Switzerland to those pods or whatever I got to do. And we were trying to figure out how to write her paperwork to legally do this. There was no answer. It's just those silly things. And she had seen her mother and her grandparents and others. One of the things people forget is Alzheimer's is often not a terminal disease on its own. You can go long times, and she's seen families spend 10 years with no connection to the world. And that, to me, scares the living daylights out of me.
Well, the hardest thing there is it's hard to know when to pull the trigger. When is the right time to pull the trigger, so to speak? Not the gun, but just to pull the trigger on, death with dignity. When has it reached the tipping point? For me, the answer is the family is suffering watching their loved one suffer. When the family is suffering and having a hard time seeing how this person's life has evolved and what their quality of life is, then you're at that point. And what do you think?
Well, I'm with you. And actually, I was reviewing somebody's documents the other day, and they had a 1.5-page kind of document. I don't know if this is legal in all states. I'm not a lawyer, but it was like, hey, if I don't know my family, if I'm not eating on my own, if I have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, dementia, advanced cognitive decline, withdraw food and water and let me go. And I was like, well, that's interesting. Like it was like 15 different categories. And I was like, that's interesting. I think when you're talking about the family, the problem is that's exactly the assumptions that hurt my child-free clients. So 32% of child-free folks will never marry. So you have no next of kin. If the bar is that their family can't deal with it, we're never going to hit the bar because they don't have the family for it or the kids for it. I always argue that we have a family, it's just not kids. To me, it's a quality of life question. If I don't know what's going on in the world, if I don't know my own name, I don't know other people's names, I can't communicate, I just don't have a connection to the world, what's the point of continuing? And that's hard to say, but that is the truth.
Yeah, I mean, it works in reverse too, because what if you're estranged from your parents and you're single, no kids, and then they haven't managed their finances well, and all of a sudden you've got kids, you've got people that with health issues that are deteriorating, that you can't stomach watching their quality of life deteriorate if you can help. And when do you say no? This is going to devastate my finances too much to help them.
So we actually have that built into our plan. We have a program called the 8 No Baby Steps, and step 7 is what's your plan for your parents. And we intentionally, with our clients, I just did this with somebody, clients in their 30s, their parents are in their 60s. We'll sit down with the parents and talk about what are their wishes, what's their finances look like, what's their situation. And what we tend to find is that the parents are either broker than we thought or richer than we thought. It's kind of like there's a big split between them. Well, I had somebody who said, "Hey, I was going to, we'll take care of our parents. We love them. We love them. We'll do our thing." And they said, "We'll cover their long-term care." I said, "Okay." They have 3 parents between them. I said, "Today's dollars, that's a $750,000." They were like, "That's not what I meant." I'm like, "Well, that is what it is."
Yeah, until it costs money, right?
Well, I mean, they were willing to, they actually were willing to spend a couple of 100,000, but there's a big difference between 102,000 to help my family and 750,000. And we don't have these conversations with our parents. And, it's all the shame and all the other stuff come with it. But it's kind of the flip side of your catching up to Fi argument that people can fix it at any time. We're like, you need to know your parents' finances and know how you can support them or not and how to set boundaries. And by the way, are you named as a power of attorney, executor? Do you have to make the decisions? But we don't talk about this stuff.
Well, that's what Cameron Huddleston is all about, because you do get scary black boxes where you had no idea what was behind the curtain. And I think it's the boomer generation. My mom doesn't talk about this stuff. I try and talk to her about it, but she says, I don't want to talk to you about my death or how much I am worth. And I'm like, well, I just asked, do you have a plan for when you can't live in your house anymore? You live in a split level home, you're 86, you're going to fall and break your hip. It's almost inevitable. What's going to happen when that happens, other than it turn into a catastrophe where you're trying to sort it out in the emergency room? And I hate these catastrophes where there was absolutely no planning. And what happens when, the hospital is done with you? They fixed your hip. You're out of the hospital in 3, 4, 5 days. Where do you go next? And what happens after the short-term rehab? We're not thinking beyond a week.
Well, yeah. And it's to me, it's about setting boundaries. Mom, I love you. My argument, my wife and I, nobody lives with us. That's it. But what'll happen is, in that case you're talking about, mom has a broken hip. Well, she's going to come live with you for 3 months while she's rehabbing. Well, then we get to the end of the 3 months and mom's comfy and she ain't leaving. And you're like, "Mom, I did not mean you're leaving with me for the rest of my life." And we get this, we call it the Childfree financial bingo, which is like, well, you don't have kids, so you can take care of mom. A lot of our single clients are like, because you don't have a spouse and you don't have kids, you can move in with mom. I'm like, none of those are appropriate assumptions. We need to be having these conversations.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest gifts my parents gave me was that they were financially independent to this point before long-term care issues, and they're in their late 80s. I can't imagine what life would have been in the sandwich generation if we were dealing with our kid issues and our parents' issues at the same time. It's going to come. I lose sleep over these decisions. Between me and my sister, I have a disabled brother who is dependent socially, emotionally on my mom, is able to live independently. But what happens to her falls to us, and it's going to be a problem. And it can't be fixed because she won't talk about it.
Oh, yeah. I just had this conversation with somebody. They have a brother who has special needs, considerable, never will be on their own independence. And mom just told him, "Hey, by the way, when I die, you're the guardian." She's like, "I didn't sign him to have kids in the first place." And now mom's saying, "I got to spend," because let's be real, her brother's about the same age. So spend the rest of my life taking care of him. That's hard.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't sign up for it. Just because they had the child doesn't mean you signed up for being the caregiver.
No, I don't know. I mean, let's be real. If you can't get your mom to talk about it, that's not a good sign for others. I mean, I joke with my clients. I tell them all to blame me. But like, "Hey, I talked to Dr. J. He says, I got to ask you these questions. I don't want to talk about it, but answer these questions." And sometimes you can blame a financial planner. And I have a couple meetings that set up next week for this. I'll sit down with their parents and ask the questions. So we'll put my child-free client, their parent, and me in a room. and say, all right, what is your plan for long term care? What does your will say? What is your power of attorney? What do you want? And it's amazing. It's really hard to start the conversation, but once you do, it gets to the good stuff that really can bring you closer, but it gets you just to understand. Here's what we do in case of an emergency.
Financial planning is holistic. It's an art, just like medicine's an art. We can talk about George Kinder and life planning because he's pivotal. He's not a name that everybody has heard about in the financial planning industry, but he, created a holistic life planning situation, and he talks to his clients and finds out the answers. As a financial planner, you're a therapist. Probably more than you realize when you sign up for this. It's not about the numbers. And I know that my mom's financial planner is not truly a planner because he didn't invite us in to have these discussions with her. I mean, supposedly they have a plan. She just says, call my lawyer, call my financial planner. I'm like, well, let's talk before it gets to that phone call. He's not prescribing an appropriate life plan. He's focused on the fact that she invests in individual bonds, needs to have $40,000 a year to spend, and he didn't protect her from scams, protect her with cognitive decline from scams. She succumbed to a terrible scam and lost about a year's worth of spending to a Target gift card scam.
Was it the grandkids in jail one?
No, not that one. It was your computer has a virus, all your data is compromised scam.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, it's so common. Those are the people that, to me, give our industry a bad name. But what they really are is they are investment managers, and that's all they really care about. And their goal is for your assets to continually go up so they can keep billing their percentage. That is the truth. That there's a reason why we do a flat fee or hourly. I mean, to get away from that. But I've looked at people saying, I did this recently. I was talking to somebody, I was working with their parent. I'm like, you're paying how much in fees for what? And they went to their local guy that everybody in the area goes to, and it was tens of thousands of dollars of fees. And I said, okay, has he talked to you about your will? No. Has he talked about long-term care? No. Has he talked to you about how to talk to your family? No. What do you guys talk about? Well, he got me into this annuity, and I'm like, oh, God, help me.
We had that person from a firm that would not be named when I came out of med school that sold us whole life insurance and billed himself as a financial advisor. Well, we sent his kids to college for a while instead of, for our own kids' college, but how much we were paying him for nothing.
Yeah, and I mean, to bring it all back to where we started, okay, you came back to this and said, hey, I want to look at my stuff. I want to take control. I started working on my investments. That's the first step. Now it's like, okay, what do I want to do with my money when I die? What do I want to do long-term care? What's my impact? These are the harder questions. I'm with you on we're closer to therapists. I say we're coaches more than therapists, but we're not diagnosing or treating any mental illness, but we're working with how do we change our money mindset and how do we get you to enjoy your money? And that's part of that holistic approach that you're on the right page with.
Yeah, it's trying to get everybody on the right page. Married couples that are coming from different directions and kids that have expectations that you can't meet. Everything's going to be fine because my parents will take care of me. No, that's not the case. You need to take care of yourself.
The assumptions out there just kill me. All right, Bill, this is a great conversation. Where can they find you, follow you? They want to dive in deeper.
Well, we want to encourage people outside of this FI bubble to find us at catchinguptofi.com. Our podcast is also by the same name, Catching Up to Fi. We're on the socials at Catching Up to Fi. We're here to help the average American who feels late getting started with their finances and wants a tribe. And we have a Facebook community that's about 16,000 strong, wants a tribe to go on the journey with so that because one of the biggest things about feeling that you're late is you feel like you're alone, and you're absolutely not alone.
You're 100% on. I'm part of your Facebook community, and I kind of hang out in there. And I actually think I've known Jackie longer than I've known you. But I think the reality check is just making finances accessible and go, we all have started late and all have to work through it and all have to find better ways. It's an awesome message. You've had some great growth because of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a vulnerable time when you wake up. And our community is known for being very protected. People bring out their dirty laundry in the community and say, I need help. And they get answers from really super smart people very empathically. And people universally say that you've changed my life. And I never thought that would be the case when we started down this journey of catching up to FI. I get more gratitude from my community in the FI space and the catching up to FI space than I've probably gotten in 26 years of practicing emergency medicine.
And they don't yell at you the way your patients do or your families do.
And they don't sue you either.
Yeah. All right, Bill, great conversation. And we will put all those links in the show notes.
All right, Jay, thanks for having me today.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a rating or review. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Please let us know your thoughts wherever comments are available, or email us at media@childfreewealth.com. To stay up to date, find and follow Childfree Wealth on social media. If you're interested in working with us, learn more by visiting our website, childfreewealth.com. We'll see you next time.